Welcome to episode 5 at the base of the Baobab tree. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I sat down and talked with the one and only Julianna Reid. I hope that you guys enjoy.
I feel like I'm counseling. This is where my mother counsels. I took down her diploma.
What is that behind you? What does it say?
It says, "Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are a vexation to the spirit."
I'm just kidding.
I'm like, I feel like it's talking about me.
Yeah, those loud and aggressive people, they're really...
We're vexations.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Julianna, how's it going?
It's going good.
Good,
How are you?
Good. I'm doing really well. It's so good to finally have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I know at the first episode, you were really sad you didn't get an invite, so I knew that we'd have to have you sooner rather than later.
Well, you know I like to be first, so...
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. We'll have to talk to Murad about that. And
Yeah.
Revisionist history, right? I'll get rid of all the other ones and pretend this was the first one.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Great.
It's the way to go.
Totally.
Awesome. So I was thinking, we've been talking about this a little bit before the podcast, and I was thinking the place to start is, and for those of them people who are listening to this, who don't know, Julianna and I went to the same high school as seemingly almost all my guests have so far. So apparently there's one commonality between a lot of people. Yeah, and so I thought that we would start just with some of the transitions that happened right at the end of high school and going on to university and moving away for the first time. You went to Manitoba, right? University of Manitoba.
Manitoba.
To study music. And that was a really kind of formative experience, like moving away, not only from your family for the first time, but from your community, like the area that you lived. So maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on that and some of the things that you learned during that experience.
Sure, yeah. So I decided in grade 11 that I was going to go into music. I hadn't thought I was going to do that previously. So I did, all the things I needed to do to get into a good school. And everyone was telling me constantly that University of Manitoba was the place that I had to go. Like everybody, Mr. Sparks, the head of the voice department at our school, was like, "You've got to go there. This is the place for you. It's such a good fit, blah, blah, blah." So I got in. I got an email actually a week after my audition, which I wasn't supposed to hear for about 2 or 3 months later. So that was like incredible. Like we were all super excited, right? And I don't know. I wasn't actually that excited, to be honest. I'm not really sure that I wanted to go to Manitoba. But as I said, everybody was like, "You have to go there. This is such a good fit." Da, da, da. So
you have another place that you wanted to go to more so, or was it just that you weren't unsure?
I actually really wanted to go to McGill. I love Montreal and I love Quebec. So that's really where I wanted to go. I had been on a tour of the music department like the previous summer or something. So that's where I wanted to go, but it's also a lot further. It was like a 5 or 6 hour flight and it didn't work out like that. And anyway, I kind of trusted people like Mr. Sparks and all of my other music mentors that I should be going to University of Manitoba. So I accepted that. And I packed up all my crap and drove there, which took a freaking long time. And
a long road trip.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very flat. Was not used to that. I had never been to
the university as soon as you go over the Rockies, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like things just seem to rise out of the earth like never before. These like big box stores, it's like, wow. But Yeah, never had been to the prairies.
You refuted the flat Earth theory because you could see the curvature, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a unique experience.
I love it.
No, it's its own beauty, I will say. Um, a little frightening, but
Yeah,
yeah. Um,
doesn't seem like my vibe, but
it's not my vibe either. I now know, but yeah, really wasn't my vibe. But I got there and I cried the entire way.
oh
My
no,
dad was driving me, and the poor guy, I cried the entire way. I did not want to go. Did not want to go
were you kind of a
at all.
homebody, like up until then?
I feel like
Yeah.
you're saying that because you know something here.
Yeah.
No, maybe. I'm not. Yeah,
For those of you that
I
can't
like
read
my
her sarcasm, Juliana is
home.
being sarcastic at this point. She's definitely a homebody.
Yeah, you also better learn how to read my sarcasm because I'm kind of known for that.
It is true.
Yeah, I'm a homebody. I'm a homebody. So yeah, that was, I don't know, it was kind of a big thing, I think, because for one, I was leaving all my family. I'm an only child, very close to my family, all that. Two, I was leaving all my friends, all like, and I mean, there were quite a few of us that were going to different schools, which is kind of it was kind
Mhm.
of like a dramatic ending for all of us. I don't know.
It was like the classic
And I was
2000s
leaving.
US like coming of age story when they all leave for university and they're like, we'll stay in touch,
Yeah,
whatever.
and we didn't. But no, I remember we all met in Fort Langley and like hung out for the day for one last time before we all left, and it was like this big, I don't know, it was a big thing. But it was fun. Yeah, so I don't know, there was a lot of like, I was just leaving a lot. I was leaving my boyfriend, I was leaving, yeah, all my friends and my family, and didn't know a soul in Winnipeg. uh I'd spent like 2 days there when I went to audition, and it was like minus 50 the whole time. So I don't know, it just was like, well.
You're like, this is
But
Canada.
yeah, I know, I was finally getting that true north kind of, I don't know,
Mm.
Canadian, ultra Canadian experience.
Oh, amazing.
um yeah, so that was kind of a big thing. And I was living in residence, and I didn't like it. And I remember that I, for the first like month or two, I was living above like a patio, and these guys would smoke weed there like 24/7. And the heat was like broken in my building, so it was on like full blast. Like I swear the building was so freaking hot. And so I had my window open like 24/7, and all I could smell was weed all the time.
Mm.
And I'm a singer, so I was like a little bothered.
Yeah, you're like you're like, my voice is my temple. I need to preserve it, kind of thing.
This isn't good. But I kind of played that card and ended up getting to move to the brand new residence building, uh, which was
Smart.
a lot nicer. Had my own bathroom, floor to ceiling windows.
Seems like a really good life hack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
just find
sometimes you just
something
gotta
that's
complain.
wrong, and then yeah, then people bend over backwards to make your accommodations better.
Yeah, it was. I actually didn't want to move. I remember that my mother practically made me, but I didn't want to because I was like alone. I knew one person. I had like a mini fridge, tons of crap to move, and I was like, how on earth am I going to do this on my own?
Hmm.
I don't know. It was fine. It all worked out. Made it. Started classes. Did all that. And it was good. It was good. I liked my profs. Like I actually would recommend to anybody going to University of Manitoba because it was truly like I've never had profs care about you like they did, which was great. um, and it was small. And yeah, but I had a really crappy experience with my voice teacher.
Oh no.
um, as you know.
Was this the
uh,
voice teacher from the school or one that was?
yeah. And she didn't teach at the school, I remember. So I had to take a bus there and like walk to her house from the bus
Oh,
stop, which was like fine. At least I thought it was fine in
but it's
September.
manageable.
Yeah. I was like, once October hit, this isn't good anymore. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I liked winter. It was fine.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get along very well. No hate to her, just didn't click. um, yeah, so kind of was dealing with that, and really wasn't good.
And so how did that that kind of lack of reciprocity in that mentorship experience, how did that affect your overall kind of musical experience? Because you mentioned that it was really good with a lot of the professors in your school, but then presumably very frequently you're having to meet with this voice teacher who you're just not connecting with for whatever reason, and this is your main thing. This is like
Yeah.
the thing that you're doing, and you're just not finding that is working.
Yeah, I think that it really tainted my experience.
Mm.
Um, I really wanted to like it too. Like, I really wanted everything to be so good. I am not the easiest person to teach, and I know that. Little oppositional, but or
I'll have to
hesitant.
ask Mr. Michael about this at some point.
Don't do that. No. But no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, but I knew that that was going to happen. And I tried to like tell her, I tried to warn her before we actually started that I had like, all these things that affected the whole whatever, right? And she was like, oh, it's all good. Like, we'll just do whatever. Um, but yeah, I think that I tried, like, we both tried for quite a while to just kind of push through it, but she was getting very frustrated and I was getting frustrated.
Mhm.
And that's not a good combination.
Yeah.
And I
Especially when
think,
you're away from your home and everyone,
yeah,
right? There's not that kind of social support. So I'm sure that those can
yeah,
get blown out of proportion, right?
totally. You're not going home to anybody who's going to be like, I don't know, like offer a listening ear, Nobody was going to help or give advice. And I know that I reached out to my high school voice teacher at some point because I just thought, I don't know, maybe she could offer something that would help. And she tried. She tried. And I ended up keeping in contact with her as like a support because it honestly, like, it was becoming a big problem. I was worried that because we were just having issues, that when it came to my um like mark for my voice lessons, that it would suffer just because we didn't get along.
Mm.
So that kind of, I ended up having to kind of reach out to some of my profs that I'd built connections with. And I got the impression actually that I wasn't the first person to have had these issues.
With that particular
um,
person.
yeah, with that
Okay.
particular person. I mean, everybody that was working with her at the time seemed to have um, great experiences with her. But they were also significantly older, which I actually think is important because she had 3 teenage daughters and I was 17 when I went. So I think that there might have been, and this is all speculation, but I think she might have been projecting a little bit, and maybe I was, I don't know, contributing to that. But yeah, so I ended up reaching out to some of my profs, and they I don't know, they tried to basically come up with a solution, because at that point, like at this point, it was probably getting close to Christmas break, and I didn't want to come back. Like I didn't want to go back. And that, I mean, that was scary, because when I decided to go into music anyway, it was kind of like one of those, well, let's just give it a shot kind of thing.
And you felt like if you didn't go back, that's like a failure or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so obviously, like,
No, not at all. No, that was kind of it. It was like one of those things where too, I was like, I don't want to peak in high school.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, like this isn't gonna happen here. I don't want my last musical experience to be, you know, my final grade 12 hurrah at like Christchurch or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted it to be more than that. So I was like, plus, actually.
The amazing Stevie Wonder tune or whatever that we did with our last.
Oh, no.
Wasn't super great for those people who haven't. It was a lower than we were capable of at the time.
Yeah, it was like going back to grade 9. Just kidding.
Like Julianna has a particularly averse memory to that song, but
I listened to it only like a couple months ago again, and I was like, no. It couldn't have been this bad.
Terrible.
Yeah. And I seem to recall we never did get a recording, even though we went to a recording studio for
conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably for the best. I mean,
yeah.
I don't particularly want to hear it again.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
There were so many great performances that it's like, you know, there's obviously going to be some that are just bad.
Yeah, but why did it have to be our final grade 12 performance?
Who knows at that time?
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get back to the story, the kind of thematic.
Yeah.
So your voice teacher, maybe there's some problems because you're the same age as her daughters.
I don't know. I mean, that's all speculation.
But one way or another, she's used to teaching with older people, so maybe she's just temperamentally not the perfect fit for you where you were at that time, and you're kind of unsure about whether you're going to go back or not. That's where we were.
Yeah. So my profs that I were talking about were really supportive, and they really wanted me to come back, which was kind of nice, because it's like, you know, you at least have somebody there who's trying to be in your corner or whatever. And so I went home and whatever, I did my thing, and I came back, and I remember being like deathly ill when I came back for some reason. And
like with what?
I was like, I mean, I don't even know. Like, nobody could figure it out, but I was sick for over 2 months, like out of commission, not singing.
Oh, was it like was it really bad everywhere, or is it just like your voice particularly that was destroyed?
It was like just the worst cold ever. Like the worst cold ever. And I have asthma, and I remember just breathing normally and hearing like the most insane wheezing. I was like, this isn't good.
You're like, oh, we're at the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna die alone in my dorm.
That's so sad.
Yeah, but the reason it's relevant is that obviously I couldn't sing. Couldn't sing for 6 weeks, I remember.
Which is meaningful in a voice program.
Yeah, pretty meaningful. Couldn't have voice lessons. Tried
once. Too bad.
Yeah, I know, gosh darn. But she was like mad. She was like not having it.
Thought you were pulling an excuse or something like
Yeah, I don't know. It was something like that. But I ended up, I'm not positive when I did this, but I ended up getting in contact with the assistant dean because it was just like not good. And so I had a meeting with him. I told him everything that had been going on and all of that. And then I ended up meeting with the dean and telling her everything that had gone on. And I mean, I was mostly really just worried about this affecting my final grade because if I was going to go back at a different program or whatever, right? That I had like a terrible lesson grade or whatever, like that would have been terrible. That would just not have been a good thing, right? Like, why would they want someone with that in their program? And they honestly just kind of tried to pacify me. Which is like, it's totally not a bad thing. Like they were doing everything they could to make it a good experience. Like I was having extra lessons with the dean, oddly. And like once a week I was having a lesson with her.
Program or the dean of the school?
No, sorry, the music program.
Sorry, I was thinking about like
should have clarified.
Well, I guess dean is just of the one program. I don't know how these hierarchies work in the school. It's like, they've added so many things. Now there's like the assistant, deans, butlers, friends. You know, it's like
people don't want to work anymore. I'm just kidding.
Terrible.
I'm just kidding.
Terrible.
No.
Shots fired.
Yeah. Yeah. No, just the dean of the program.
Okay, cool. That would make sense if she's giving you voice lessons. It would be kind of strange if like the president of the university is like giving you voice.
But she wasn't even a voice prof. She was like a piano prof.
Oh.
But like regardless, it was fine. It was like all of that was good, whatever. I got better at some point.
Hopefully.
At some point. I survived the negative 50-degree weather.
Not a small feat.
No. No. Yeah, it was really, and I've been told it was a terrible winter, like worse than normal. I'm like, let's just throw everything at her all at once. No, but I do think too, like, everyone was always going, like, being super sympathetic and being like, oh, you know, when I got there, I was 17. You're 17. You moved away from your family, like as if this was the explanation for not getting along with my teacher. And like that whole thing that everybody says how university is so much harder than high school. Like you'll never be prepared. And oh my God, when I got there, I was like, are you kidding me? This is so freaking easy. Because we'd been going to a fine arts school that like, we were doing pretty much the same amount of music work, but with all the other things we had to do.
And in a program that actually like has high standards and isn't like, you're emerging, you're metamorphosing into your like, oh my goodness. Yeah, like when the schools drift too far away from then university is a lot harder when you're not prepared. There are 12-year-olds going to university in like some places, like get out of here. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, I don't know what I just keep looking at these people like, huh? Are you sure?
You don't know how to sing and you're in a sing
right? No, I'm totally kidding. But like, if you think about it, for us, we were in, I don't know, most of us were in almost all these like ensembles that we could have been. I was taking theory lessons outside of it. I was in another choir. I was taking voice lessons. I was taking flute lessons. You add all of these things up, like that's a crap ton of things to do, including all of our sciences, English, you know, all these things that we were required to take. So yeah, I just like, no, y'all are wrong. This is a breeze. I get to nap every day after my morning classes. What are you talking about?
That's amazing.
Yeah, I did nap a lot.
Well, that's a good thing to know.
I know, right? Like, who wouldn't want to know?
Yeah. So if you ever, want to go into music or you want your kids to go into music or whatever, just go to fine arts. and then
Yeah,
prepared and you'll
it'll
be
be a
able to take
breeze.
apps.
I mean, even if you don't want to go into music and you just want university to be like fun and easy, figure it out. Go to LFS.
Yeah.
There's always photo, you know, where all the other majors wash out into. I'm
Is
just kidding.
photo advantageous? I'm just kidding.
Just kidding. Totally just kidding.
Terrible shots.
Well, I mean, it would have been worse if you were in photo.
Yeah, these are like, this is like a throwback to the
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
just completely arbitrary divides between the majors. Like, oh, at fine arts school, for people who don't know, there's 6 majors, so you can be a music major, which is the kind of the best one, and then you can be
Oh yeah.
if you want like drama or dance or visual art or writing, and oh, what, there's one more, photo.
Did
I'm
you
totally
say photo?
joking.
Like, yeah.
I'm totally joking. They're all equal. Everyone is valued.
You
Okay,
sure?
Julianna
I'm
says
just
no.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to talk about. I feel like I've been talking about those good old LFAS days a lot lately,
Have you?
especially with these people that have been on your podcast.
Really? Yeah. It's interesting. It does seem like there's a lot of nostalgia going on. It seems like everyone I talk to, and maybe this is just my friend group, but everyone I talk to that went there
Okay.
has really, really positive experiences. So I don't know. Seems like just like a very nostalgic place to have gone.
Yeah, that's a funny thing that you bring up. I've been talking about that a lot lately with one of my friends from
You
LFAS,
didn't have
how
as good an experience as
vastly different it seems. No, not that. Just that, in the last year, it seems like some people's
like it changed or something?
more negative experiences have come out of the woodwork a little bit,
Mhm.
and it's just very different than what we experienced.
Might be part of just like a larger cultural
I
thing.
think it is. I think it totally is. Yeah,
But,
it's interesting though.
but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good people there, I think, that worked really, really hard to create
Yes,
a really good environment. Like even when I was talking with
totally.
Juan and hearing about his story, like the stuff that especially Mr. Goddard and Mr. Bonner pulled in order to like get him in. He was dropped out of
Yeah,
school. He was like probably not going back, like high school dropout, and he was, it was a really challenging situation. And those 2 guys especially, like really, really good character cred to like what they did in
totally.
order to get him reinstated into like a really positive program that I think ended up being better in the long run. But I think that it's
Yeah.
a really tricky thing, and maybe this is kind of a detour from your narrative that we can go back to later. But I think that um, it's really interesting how important education is in really developing
Mhm.
who people become, and I think that it's especially um, it's especially sad that it's not as valued a job as something, say, like being a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, that maybe in society people look up to and say, that's a really respectable job. But being a teacher,
Right.
it's not that it's not
Mhm.
respectable, it's just not, it's not often held to the same degree of reverence. And in
Yeah.
terms of how much you get paid, the same
Mhm.
thing. But I think that it's one
Totally.
of the most
Totally.
important jobs, and at least for me in my life, and I think you maybe feel the same, a lot of the most important
Yeah.
people have been teachers that have really helped you.
Absolutely.
And you want to go into education, so I was wondering if you could
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on your thoughts on that topic.
Yeah. Um, I mean, first I'd say that even deeper than just education being important is the kind of education.
Mm,
Um, because I think, especially for us coming from a school that was tailored to our interests, that can make all the difference, I think. So, first, I would say that the education system probably needs to adapt to include more of that. And then we wouldn't have people having such terrible experiences in high school or whatever. But yeah, I think teachers kind of always have the the power to make a difference in a child's life, and whether or not they choose to is kind of a big deal. Like in the program that I'm in currently, I end up interacting with a lot of people going into teaching, or there's quite a few women in my program that have done other degrees and now are coming back. They have kids, they're married, whatever, and now they're doing their teaching degree. And it's interesting hearing different people's perspectives. I think our generation, or this generation of teachers coming up, is maybe going to be able to implement that kind of more unique teaching style for each children. And I'm sure that's because of the kind of education they're getting, but it is interesting hearing from people who are part of that earlier, I don't know, like education style. And I think that they often felt like, or feel like, they weren't taught, like, how do I say this? Like, they weren't taught with their own, yeah, like they didn't get to experience that kind of unique, I don't know, a teaching style or whatever, something that actually fits for them. And so they end up teaching in this just really generalized way that doesn't help people, right? Like, I mean, it's only going to help that one small group of like thousands, millions, whatever, of children in our school systems. So I don't know, it's just a very interesting, it's an interesting thing, because I think that even with teachers of that age, some of them still go above and beyond. Some of them still choose to learn how to teach Indigenous issues, like all these things, right, that they weren't taught. So I think it comes down to, yeah, that's exactly who I think about all the time when I'm in my Indigenous studies class or whatever, right? But I think that maybe
that was a really fun class too. She made it like really.
I never took it.
Well. Oh, you did?
I'm so sad that I never took it. But I also had a very different, I don't know, just a very different expectation of what that would have been in. Yeah, totally. And a different mindset. Absolutely.
It was pretty much the same as like a regular English course. It was just that the texts that you would read were were written by either Indigenous authors or concerning Indigenous. Like we read Thomas King, and we read, a lot of we read Indian Horse and things like that, which I and the what was it, the book, like the book award for that class was The Inconvenient Indian, which is also a really good book for anyone who hasn't maybe read any of those books. But yeah, and for listeners outside of Canada too, that's one issue that's maybe a little bit more fringe in like the world perspective. But it is in Canada, there's a rising awareness of like trying to be more aware of Indigenous affairs and accommodations. So yeah.
So I don't know, I think teaching isn't as respected as it needs to be, but I think that it's not just as simple as raising pay, or like I think whenever we do things like raise pay or whatever, try and make something, like raise more awareness of whatever it is, that maybe too that requires the actual profession to step up a little bit as well, and maybe put their, like, the processes that go on a little bit more at the forefront, and make it more available and known to the general public, which I think would be a fantastic thing for education.
What exactly?
I don't know where I'm going with this. I just mean like curriculum wise and teaching style wise. I think teaching is teachers can do whatever they want within reason, right? Within following the curriculum, but that doesn't mean that their teaching style is always going to be like it's not uniform, right? So when you teach multiple ways teach teachers how to teach multiple ways for different children's needs, I think it helps a teacher be more well-rounded, and would help unify teaching as a profession. Not that I think that everybody needs to stand there and be a drone, but I think that, because right now a lot of it is just personal interest, like with teachers who teach Indigenous issues or whatever. It's how far they're willing to take it. Like if we actually taught everybody how far you could, right? Or different things like that, like that might help. A lot of teachers feel like, at least the ones that I talk to in my program, or older people, feel like they aren't or weren't given the same like opportunities to know how far they could take things. So I think that this isn't meshing well, but
Yeah, I think
that it's just, yeah. You try and recap that.
yeah. Well, I think there's a few things. I think what you're saying about like everyone has very it's a double-edged sword because all kids have their own idiosyncrasies.
Mhm.
But teachers also are people and therefore
Yeah.
have their own idiosyncrasies. And a lot of times those idiosyncrasies can match really well. And
Mhm.
maybe the mentor-mentee type relationship and finding the right, mentor is a great thing. But when you're, a teacher and you're responsible for all these kids, no matter how hard you try, you can't accommodate everyone perfectly, but you can, by being more aware of a bunch of different things, try to become more well-rounded. And like maybe you have to give up some of your energy that might have helped these kids and focus that in over here where you're not as strong, and then you help everyone a little bit. But I think it's a
Yeah.
really, really hard job, and people aren't given credit for how challenging it is. And people are all often um, one mistake you can get like really in trouble now, which I think is also
Yes.
challenging because it's so hard that it needs to be, yeah, we should be aware when someone makes a mistake. Hey, that was wrong, you should do it like this. But I think if anything, teachers should base kind of more on science than anything, right? Like trying to teach kids how to think critically rather than just indoctrinating them with whatever particular belief
Well, yeah,
they're
for
thing at the
sure.
time, right?
For sure.
But it's so
Yeah.
challenging, and it's really, I think, interesting that you mentioned you're going into it with these older people that probably have very different views than you. And I
Yeah.
wonder if maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more on some of those differences and some of the values of the older generation and some of the maybe drawbacks of it,
Yeah,
in your view, of course.
I kind of bring it up because I'm taking an Indigenous studies class right now, and there's a few older women who are going into their post-degree program and are taking whatever they need to take to get there, their prereqs or whatever. And there's one of them, and I remember on the first day of class, we were sent out into breakout rooms to discuss, I don't even know, like some random, obviously, question. And I remember going totally off course. Like it was not relevant at all, but she started talking about how her husband can't teach Indigenous issues because he wasn't taught how to teach them and all these things. And I'm just like sitting here going, okay, well, I doubt Miss Carnwright was taught how to teach Indigenous issues. Like, you there's Google, you can figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
And from like, it just seems like every time she says something, I just am like, what are you talking about? And I know that that's totally on me, but it's so funny just like learning. I don't know. And she's like very out there with her views, and some of them are not quite that out there and are very, like, they're all very sweet people. It's just, I don't know. It's like an interesting, they were just taught so different than we were. And I think we all know that. But I guess my expectation of teachers, and I'm sure that that's formed also from the kind of teachers that we had, but my expectation is that they're also always learning.
Mm.
Like, you can't sit there and teach the same thing you taught 30 years ago because that's relevant now, right? Or some of it is like, and
Yeah.
your
And
teaching style is not going to be up to snuff now, right?
I think that theme of lifelong learning too is just super important, especially in education, because if
Mm-hmm.
you think that you've learned everything and that there's no need for you to learn and you're just teaching other people, then that's not really, well, you're teaching them, but you're teaching them, like you said, maybe an outdated thing, or maybe just a view that is no longer as helpful. Like maybe what worked
Yeah.
50 years ago, like conventional wisdom 50 years ago is a little different than conventional wisdom
Totally.
today. And I think,
Totally.
yeah, like the best teachers that I had in my life, and at fine arts, this seemed to be just such a theme, is that everyone who taught really, they learned. They didn't just teach; they learned
Mhm.
as they were going, and they were constantly looking for other pieces of input, um, and other people that had very, very different approaches or very, very different experiences to try to kind of
Yeah,
figure out what that was, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Really interesting. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
let's hop back onto the the thread that you were talking about earlier about your experience moving on from the University of Manitoba, and then when you got sick and you're moving back. So what? So
Yeah.
you're sick. You're out of commission. You can't really do anything musically at this point. On top of
No.
that, you have this negative connection with your voice instructor, and they're trying to be conciliatory to everything, but it's not seeming like it's going well. It's not seeming like it's working. Where did you go from there, and why did you um, kind of go the direction that you did?
Well, when I was still there, I thought that I was well, I mean, I got my crap together in like whatever it was, a month and a half or something to get something ready for my jury, and I did fine, like it was all
And
fine.
what is a jury? Just for
Oh, sorry.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so when you're a voice student, you basically have I can't remember what it's called, but there's like this class on your transcript, and it encompasses like your voice lessons, it encompasses any extra meetings that you would have had with like a pianist, all these things, right? And you're graded basically on everything. Um, and at the end of it, you have a jury, which is it acts as a final exam, basically, kind of thing. So it's kind of like an audition all over again. Like you walk into this room and there's a panel in front of you, and it's a little terrifying. You basically just go and perform like four pieces or something, very similar to the audition. It felt like the audition. They were in the same place with the same, like it was exactly the same thing.
These are comfortable.
Yeah, by that point I was like, but no, not at all. But yeah, so that's at least that was my experience of a jury at University of Manitoba. So I did that. It was fine. I said goodbye to my voice teacher. Was very happy about that. Um, yeah, did all of the performances that I had to do for all the things, whatever. And packed up my dorm room and I thought I was going to come back. So I put a lot of my crap in storage and I packed up everything else.
Is it one of
And
those situations where it's like all still there?
what do you mean? Like, still?
Yeah.
Oh
Like
my
Brad
God.
thing with
Oh
moving to Mexico, and the storage is just like, well, it'll
no.
maybe one day we'll
And
get
you have the key, don't you?
Sorry?
Yeah. You have a key for his storage, don't you?
I do actually.
Yeah. You have
Someone's gonna
access
watch
to
the
all of
podcast and be like, I
those.
know how to steal it, just have to find where he lives and then get his key.
No. Plus,
No.
why would you want it? The guy had like nothing in his basement suite. I'm just kidding.
That's true. There's like a mattress and so there's some nice clothes.
Yeah, didn't he take his clothes with him? We're
Oh.
really off track here. Let's discuss Murad's wardrobe.
Yeah, I've really liked the green shirt that he was wearing that one time, and he didn't take that one, so I have the key, and maybe we'll see.
I know that he stained some of his pants at some point, and I bet they're still there. So
So if I get poor enough, then that
yeah,
might be something
yeah,
I pull.
yeah.
All right.
Really
So,
interesting.
so back to the
Yeah,
whatever you call it, previously scheduled program.
yeah. I flew home basically with like way too much crap, and I remember that I was going to Greece, which was awesome. And I was in Greece the whole time, and I couldn't stop thinking about what I was going to do next year, even though I had already decided that I was going back. I was there for like 3 weeks. And I remember maybe we were leaving in like 3 days or something, and I was like, okay, I can't do it. And I told my mom, and I was like, I'm not going back. I can't go
Wow.
back. Um,
That's a big decision,
yeah,
right?
it was a big decision. It totally was. I remember I was like sitting by the pool and I was like, because we rented a villa and I was reading and I was like, nope, not doing it. I can't do it. I cannot. Um, yeah. So that was really hard. It was such a hard decision. But as soon as I told my mom, I remember just like feeling, I don't know, I don't even know how you explain it, but like utter relief that I wasn't going back.
Mm.
Um,
Like you're at peace with the
yeah.
decision kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was just so easy not to, because I mean, I was already dreading going back. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I mean, every time I left that whole year, I was dreading going back, and I was like, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better, whatever.
And even from the
And
beginning, you felt like it was
oh,
someone else's
totally.
decision in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of my musical experiences have felt that way for me. And I
mm.
know that, and I like it's something that I'm now aware of.
Oh yeah.
But Manitoba as a whole just it didn't fit for me. I didn't get along with my teacher. I hadn't really made a lot of friends. Most of the people um, in the voice program specifically, but in all of the music programs, most of them were from Winnipeg. Most of them had gone to the same high schools and already had
Okay.
groups. Yeah, seriously, right?
Like Winnipeg
There were like,
sounds like a place
yeah,
you shouldn't have friends from if you want to be
there
respectful.
were like two people
I'm
from
totally joking.
other. No, 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 no. I
My
mean, it's
dad
not
grew up in
like.
Winnipeg, by the way, so
Oh
I feel like
shit! Sorry.
I can make like no, he hated it. But I feel like I
Okay, good, great.
well,
The
Winnipeg and
club.
Japan, so he was kind of one of those people that always moved around. But yeah,
Okay, yeah. I mean, there were two people who weren't from Winnipeg. I think in my year, like two people. That's like
it just goes to show
nothing.
how few people would want to move there.
Well, yeah. Oh, and I should actually correct myself. There were people from Manitoba, but like there were two people from outside of Manitoba. That was it. I was from Vancouver, and one of the other people was from like Thunder Bay or something.
Wow.
And
So there's
yeah,
nobody with, even from your like hemisphere.
yeah, like literally nobody. And they all oddly knew that I was coming
Were they all like
from.
waiting there, like "Welcome to Manitoba"? And you're like,
No,
"Whoa!"
no, but like they somehow knew that like
Getting some
I
Get Out
and
vibes right
the
now.
it was weird, dude. Like seriously, they knew that I was coming from Vancouver and they knew that the other girl was coming from Thunder Bay. And I was like, how do you all freaking know this? Did you have some sort of meeting where they like told you? Like it was the weirdest thing. How would you know that?
It's all flat, so
But
when they yell, their
and
voices just
well, it's
continue.
true, right? Like when they were making the decision about who to let in, I'm sure everybody could hear.
They don't even need phones; they can just yell. Be like,
Totally.
"Hey there,
Totally.
bud. When are we getting the new the new crew coming in? You know?"
Yeah, from their igloos too, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
igloos.
Riding up on their polar bears.
Have you ever had an experience like that where you met someone outside of Canada who actually thought like what's the most ridiculous thing that you've had somebody think was a Canadian trait who wasn't a Canadian that you personally experienced? You go first and then I'll tell you mine experience.
I don't know if I can pick like an experience, but I
Ever
know
had
that.
anything where someone said something even like remotely like that's
Oh, well, I mean,
strange?
I remember being in Montana and my whole like yeah,
Why
my
didn't we talk
two.
about Montana? We're gonna have to talk about that later.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, my two step cousins who were my age, like we were the same, almost the same age, they genuinely had no idea that Canada was a place, basically. But that's irrelevant. I was at like a Walmart or something, which is a terrible place to be in Montana. But and
Yeah,
they asked like where
scary.
we were from, my mom and I, and we were like, oh, we're from Canada. And they're like, with your paper money? And we were like,
Oh, what?
or like plastic money or something like that. And I was like, yeah, well, you, okay. Like, what are you supposed to say to that? Yeah, we have plastic money. I don't like.
Like it's not real.
She was like mad that we had plastic money. And
Oh,
she's like,
she
I
was
don't
angry
understand
about
why
it.
you would have that. Like, okay.
Wait, she was from Jersey?
No.
So the accent just kind of sounded like
I've never tried to do a Jersey accent. Can I do it? Was that an
kind
accent?
of sounded like Janice from Friends. That was kind of the vibe that I got. But
I'm never doing that again.
or Janet? Is it Janet or Janice? Now I feel like an idiot if I messed it up.
Janice.
It's one of those two. It's something.
It's Janice. It's not Janet.
Okay, yeah. I was right. Okay, we're good.
But I feel like you have a good one. You need to tell me your crazy.
I do. I'll keep it super brief so we can get back to the previously scheduled program. But but I do have an experience that was very, very ingrained in my memory and it wasn't so much that these people didn't know, like it wasn't so much what they said overtly, it was more so how far I could convince them what I was, what it was like. So I was in Vegas, which I frequent quite often. And unfortunately, I can't go there right now because of the pandemic, but I would be there otherwise. So I'm totally joking. So
yeah,
I was
you
in
and
Vegas,
your gambling, eh?
I was in Vegas. I guess we were staying there, and we were at the hotel that we were staying at. I was with my family, and there was this family. I guess there's two kids from Iowa, which I do know where Iowa is, by the way. So
as you should.
As you should. Not that I would ever want to go there, but no.
Yeah.
And so
Bring
we
a
were in
gun.
the pool, we were talking to these kids, and they asked, when I said that I was from Canada, they said, "Oh, you guys don't have electricity, right?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And these kids were about the same age as me at the time, and I wasn't that old. I guess I was probably like 13. But still, 13, 14, that's pretty ridiculous. Like they thought we didn't have electricity. And so I was like, this is too good to pass up. So I just deadpan. I was like, yeah, no, actually, once in a while we go to like the power plant. There's like a couple across Canada. They're like, really? I was like, yeah, like we just got them like a few years ago. We're pretty hyped about it up there. And they were like, oh, that's cool. And so I was like, yeah. So, I live in an igloo actually. It's a 3-story igloo. So I was like, it's pretty like upper class Canada. Like you have to have a lot of money in order to get these big igloos. They're like, oh, cool.
I mean, it sounds nice.
Yeah. And so I kept it going. I was like, yeah, we have a pet polar bear. Totally bought that. They're like, oh, really? I was like, yeah, it's kind of like a dog, but a lot bigger. They like the same kind of vibe. And they were like, oh, wow. And so they asked about how we get around because I was like, yeah, there's no roads or anything like that. So I told them the poor people have to take dog sleds, but rich people can get snowmobiles and use those to go around. Even though I guess it was terrible. But they bought hook, line, and sinker. It was great.
I mean, if they ever found out the truth, that must have rocked their world.
Yeah, maybe they'll listen to the podcast and they'll be like, I was lying? No!
And then you'll have to have them on.
I'll have to have them on. That'd be cool. I wonder if I could find, I don't know their names or anything. Just, hey, is there any people from Iowa who remember believing that Canadians didn't have electricity? I'd probably get them.
You were in Vegas at this time, at this date, at this hotel.
Oh, I could probably find those details. That's true. Good scientific thinking, Julianna.
Oh, well, you know me.
Yeah. Okay.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Anyways, from Montana to Iowa, back to Canada, and over to Manitoba.
I mean, you know what? Prairies, not that different from middle of nowhere.
It's pretty much the same.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, not trying to offend my remaining Manitoban friends or family at all. Yeah,
while we're on the tangent, is there anything you want to say about Manitoba? Because I feel like you want to say at least one thing about Manitoba.
Like, what do you mean?
I mean, why did I say Manitoba? I meant Montana.
Oh, Montana. Okay.
Yeah, that was a Freudian.
Is there anything I want to say about Montana?
Well,
my grad quote. Oh, what were you going to say?
was just saying that for people who don't know, the reason I ask is Julianna always talks about Montana.
Not as much anymore, though. You have to admit.
She used to in high school.
In high school and middle school. Yeah, my grad quote was, actually, let me see. I think it was, Montana's not a state, it's a feeling, or something like that. I wish I had my yearbook to get it out, because, yeah.
I find it so funny because you're an interesting person in that you're an amalgamation. Everyone is an amalgamation of all these different things, especially nowadays. Like, with globalization, everyone's from everywhere, and but you are.
I'm particularly unique.
You're the least like Montanian person in a lot of ways, and yet you're very like, yeah. It's just, I guess it's just a part of the. I guess you're like the nature of Montana. You like that vibe, but like, I don't know, the people in Montana just like a very different vibe from Julianna, always.
No, I'm born into like an academic Mennonite family.
Yes.
And I'm a classical singer and I do yoga, but I love Montana. It all makes sense, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I am. It's a good point. I mean, it's because my step family is
Yeah.
American, right?
Totally.
And they have a ranch in Montana, and we used to have a house there, and yeah, so I mean, it is true, and I think I've changed
John Denver.
a lot. And John Denver. I mean, he was more into Colorado, but
It's
same vibe.
Similar vibe, yeah.
Totally similar vibe. In fact, he has a few songs about Montana. And so does Chris Stapleton, or at least he mentions Montana.
Okay, top 5 songs about Montana.
Okay, that's a lot of songs.
Okay, top 3. Just give me a couple.
Montana Cafe.
Okay.
I don't know the names of them. Crap. I don't know. I don't know the names of the songs. But there are a few. There are quite a few, actually. I know that in like the height of my obsession, I had a playlist dedicated to songs about Montana. Don't have that anymore. We've recovered. We've, worked through that obsession and have come out on the other side of it.
Now you're Canadian.
But, I am Canadian. It's okay. I embrace it now, I embrace being on the West Coast.
It's pretty here too. I mean, yeah, it's a different kind of.
Yeah, and actually, since going to Manitoba and coming back, I've like fallen in love with living on the West Coast.
Really, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's like you didn't know what you had until you left and then came back. Kind of idea.
Well, totally. And I mean, I think that what plays into it is that for a lot of, we lost our Montana house, or we sold it. For me, it was like I lost it. And that was when I was in grade 8. And that was like really a big thing in my family. And it was really hard for my stepfather in particular. And yeah, so I was kind of like always longing for Montana. And I mean, to be fair, I still feel this way. There's something about Montana, and it's not all of Montana, but where we go specifically and the ranch and everything, that brings out like a connection that I've never had anywhere else, like in me. And I don't even know, most people haven't experienced it because they look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but it just is. So for me, like I long for that.
Of that area, or just with the feeling, or
like a feeling, don't even really know, like it like washes over me when I get there, kind of thing. It's like
so cool.
It's the weirdest thing. It truly is the weirdest thing. And yeah, so I long for that, and I always have. And I mean, whatever, it got like kind of blown up, and it was like, it ended up being like a funny thing in high school, right? Because it was like, oh, well, I mean, she's identified by her obsession with Montana and whatever, right? And it was kind of like a funny thing with our friend group. And whatever. And that was like
But it is
fine.
a real connection that's kind of the basis of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's something a lot more than that for me. And so in high school, I was always just trying to get to Montana, like constantly. Like I did not like where I lived. I felt like it was way too like confined and restricted, even by the beautiful mountains that we have around us. Like it just didn't. I don't know. I couldn't get here. Like I couldn't get myself here. I was always stuck trying to be somewhere else. So when I actually left here for a year, it I realized that, there is a lot of beauty here and there is a lot that I can connect to here. So I think, yeah, it's an interesting, I mean, and that's like a pretty common thing, right? Leaving and coming back and going, oh my God. But yeah, I definitely feel more connected to now.
It's really cool. Yeah, I think, like you say, it is an experience that a lot of people say they have, but I don't think that that makes it any less important of a thing. And some people have the opposite experience where, they move somewhere and they realize, oh,
Yeah,
I love this place.
totally.
But I think that every place has its own kind of beauty, innate natural beauty, cultural beauty, lots of different
Totally.
things. And I think it's just such a weird phenomenon how these different axes kind of connect with different people, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
everyone.
I like that you said that cultural experience too, because I think that Winnipeg specifically somehow has like an incredible art scene and has all these things, right? So if that connects more for you, then that's like it's a great place to be. I mean, I like to be outside all year round. Manitoba's not going to do that for you. I remember I was waking up every morning and going running with one of my friends, and then it got to like, I don't even know, the end of October only, and we were like, this is not happening anymore. Like, it was fine. We were running and like, whatever, it was like -10, but then it started to snow and it would just never stop. So I was not that dedicated, even though the music department did have a running club. I was not about to do that. Yeah.
Is there any indoor? Like,
No!
no, like
They would
indoor
freaking
track?
go running outside in the middle of winter.
Oh, I don't even know if I can pull that. That's.
I don't believe you, but yeah, it was not my gig. I got into yoga after that.
Yeah. Well,
Like, I would be inside, thank you.
it's funny. I have heard that too from more than a couple people from Winnipeg that they really, really love it and that they've, miss it in a lot of ways. I'm sure that it's just from an outsider's perspective, you're like, wow, yeah, -50, flat, not super fun. But yeah, I mean, there must be
Yeah.
some really, really great things about Winnipeg that make people, connect with it like you connect.
Well, and I don't think I experienced it fully. Like, to be honest, I didn't have a car. And I was coming from having a car and driving everywhere and like whatever. I didn't really have like a big friend group and I didn't have any family and I didn't have rights. So I wasn't like exploring. I wasn't going outside of Winnipeg. I mean, I would take transit, but you're not going to go to a lake, right?
Yeah,
On
yeah.
transit. Like it doesn't work that way. So I didn't really get to explore any of the outskirts and maybe that would have changed my outlook. I don't really know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that like I ended up meeting oddly childhood friends of my grandmother when I was there. I got introduced to them and like the nicest people ever. And they would come pick me up and let me stay overnight on like Saturdays, and then I would go to church with them on Sundays. And
Like
I don't know,
an
it
older
was
couple then, like your
yes,
grandparents?
yeah, and they were like super involved in like the cultural arts scene there, and I ended up going to all of these really random things that I would never have gone to before and certainly wouldn't have gone to in Vancouver. So like that was really interesting for me too, and I still think it's odd to be honest that Winnipeg has all these things. Like I went back to visit last year before COVID hit and I was like I got taken to this ice music thing, and it was like people playing instruments made out of ice and singing,
It's
and
the only natural resource. It's there.
ice. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I don't know. It's just like a very interesting. It's an interesting scene there, and I don't think that Vancouver has anything like it.
Yeah, Vancouver's interesting with the art scene because
Totally.
I don't think we have a particularly good art scene in some senses, but at the same time, it's like
No.
it's a very artistic looking kind of
I
city.
know.
So it's like,
Isn't that bizarre?
yeah, it's weird, right? Like you go and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it must be so artsy and stuff, but yet there isn't like compared to other big
No.
cities like Toronto or
Hmm.
even I think even Montreal definitely, but I think like even
Absolutely.
Calgary is known for some
Oh,
more
really?
fun stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of odd. I feel like Vancouver, we like restricts its artists more. Like there, you can't just. I don't know. Like we're just very, at least, and I can only speak from like a classical music scene, but it's very restricted. There's a right way to do it, and that's the way you got to do it,
Mhm.
kind of thing. Like at least in my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting those differences, just in like the cultural variability between different cities, even within the
Totally.
same country.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so you moved you moved back to Vancouver area
Yeah.
after one semester, and
A
so
year. I did 2 semesters.
okay, you did two semesters. Oh, it was the
I did
summer
two
that you came back.
semesters. Yes, I came back in the
Ah,
summer.
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry.
yeah, I think that was probably I should have just been paying more attention.
Oh,
Um,
I'm hurt. I'm just kidding.
um, yeah, so if anyone missed the detail, it's okay. I did too. Um,
Probably
um,
my fault.
yeah. So when you moved back, you didn't go back to school immediately, right?
No.
So what were some of the things that you did in the interim during that time to try to figure? Because eventually you landed on the decision that you wanted to go into education in some sense.
Hmm.
So how did you go from moving away, coming back, trying to decide kind of where your direction's going, and then end up in education, which maybe isn't a completely different direction, but it's certainly not
Yeah.
performance.
Um, when I got back, I started working at my dad's restaurant, and I worked there basically from when I got back to Greece, so like June to August. And after that, I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And I know that I sent out some sort of like wrote some sort of thing on like my community's Facebook page saying I'm like available for childcare, da da da. And somebody really close to me reached out and said that they had just had twins and they have a daughter, da da da, and they'd love some help. So basically, like it's called a mother's helper. So I did that, and I worked at my dad's for another, I don't know, whatever, couple months. And then I was like, okay, I really got to get out of the restaurant thing. And it just was not like a super good fit for me. So I somehow found like a family. I somehow found like the connections or whatever. And so I started working full time as a nanny with two young girls. And I was doing that when COVID hit. And one of them had previously been in school. So now I was homeschooling and looking after a 2-year-old. And I mean, that's not super out of character for me, as you know. I'd been volunteering in the kindergarten classroom and grade 1 and 2 classrooms at Langley Fine Arts School when I had been
Yeah,
there. So,
this is
not
so
super.
cute.
Yeah, they're so cute. um, yeah, they're something else. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so I started doing that and did that throughout the summer and everything. And I ended up deciding, kind of through doing that I probably wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I was also volunteering at Langley Fine Arts again with the kindergarten classroom. And kind of what's funny about it is that my best friend ended up kind of doing the same thing as me. She ended up dropping out of her program and working, and we
What
were
program
both.
was she studying initially?
I think she was just in like a general arts program,
Okay.
but she was at UFV and felt like she'd taken all the interesting courses and like there was like nothing else to take. So she's like, this isn't gonna work. So she
Not a good
dropped
place
out.
to be.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and I don't think that either of us knew necessarily what we wanted to do, but we were both volunteering in kindergarten classrooms, and we were both just like knew that we were both going to go back to school. Not sure either of us knew what it or in what program, but we ended up applying at UVic together. Neither of us got in to the education department, but we were still accepted into the school. So we were currently both taking education classes, just not in the program. And so anyway, I kind of finished. I applied to that. Told the family that I was looking for that I was going back to school. Finished out the summer with them, and I mean that was in COVID time, right? So went to school in September online and kind of just been doing that, just taking prereqs that I need. But plot twist again, I was like, okay, well, don't really want to do this anymore. I can never make up my mind. And well, no, and then that's not true. It's more like, I think for me, music has always been a part of my life. So imagining not doing it at all is like, it's kind of hard. But I was so unhappy where I was before that I couldn't figure out if I was going to get over it. Like, to be honest, I couldn't. It was like, how do I get over this? To be honest, like I didn't listen to music anymore. I didn't like music anymore. I was like totally oppositional to anything musician. So yeah, I had to get over it, and it took me a long time, and I realized in December, bad timing, that I wanted to go back into music. So I started taking lessons again. I took lessons for only 1 month, and I like busted out an audition tape that was due at the end of January, and
So is that for
I'm
this
waiting.
upcoming year then?
Yeah, I'm waiting for my results,
And
basically.
which school would you attend?
I only applied at UVic,
UVic. And
which is where I'm going right now.
So it's less, it's not like you need to transfer everything over. It's just like
Yeah. Oh God, I was like not doing that again. I've already done that once. My mother's done it 8 times. I'm not going to be like that.
During her time in school, or
over the course of her entire life, she's gone to school at 8 different schools and had to transfer
back and
kept going. But yeah, so
I
was not going to do that. She has 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
At least it's not like she did 8 and she doesn't have any degrees or something like that.
No. But I don't want to do that. The last time she just finished another degree, and the last time she had to contact 7 schools to get her transcript.
Oh.
So I'm not doing that. Anyway, I was like not going to do that. It was not happening. So yeah, and that's fine, because the other part of it really is like, where is a good fit, right? And I didn't want to go back to University of Manitoba, although it was a thought. And I didn't want to go to UBC. I've never wanted to go to UBC. I wasn't going to apply. Like, it just nowhere else was probably the right fit. So yeah, I applied.
What was the reason that UVic stood out to you in other schools, like within the same area? Because I guess presumably one of the main reasons is being close to this area. But like,
yeah, I mean,
SFU and UBC and other schools, like why, what stood out with UVic? I'm just curious.
For music or just in general, like this year? Or
yeah, I meant for music, like,
okay.
I guess in general, but you're studying music, so I guess that's the more.
Yeah, I mean, when I was going into education, I applied at SFU and UVic, and I got in at SFU. And UVic took literally forever to tell me, so I had to accept my whatever
SFU one
at SFU and pay the thing and everything, and then I found out that I had gotten in at UVic, and that was where I wanted to be. So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to go to UVic because, I mean, Lower Mainland doesn't really fit for me. I know that. Like, I don't really want to be here permanently. And it's just not like my vibe. So I wanted to go somewhere else, but I wanted to be close enough that I could get here on the weekends if I wanted to or whatever, right? Like, from that perspective, it was good. It's just a ferry right away.
Yeah.
And no planes, no freezing temperatures, no. But yeah, so I think a lot of it was proximity to here, but also just not being here. um, and knowing that when I was going into education specifically, they have an incredible education program. And then now with music, I think part of it for me this time around is not wanting to go somewhere super prestigious.
Okay.
That like from just a personal pressure perspective, I am really focused now with music on learning to just love all of it rather than, I mean, I love performing. I love like that performance high that you get after.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course.
but that's not going to sustain you, right? Like that doesn't sustain you through all of those musicianship classes and theory classes and keyboard class. Like it doesn't sustain you. So I like this time around, it was really just, okay, well, how can we love all of it?
Everything. Yeah.
How can you love
When
practicing?
when
How
you're
can
an
you, right?
adrenaline junkie, how do you like just living a regular life?
Right.
Does that happen?
Exactly. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But like a little bit, like in terms of music, yeah, like you're not always gonna be in that place. So yeah, and also for me a lot of that is being like the best that I can be in that moment, right? Because typically when you're in a performance, you're being the best. And that was my high school experience. That wasn't my university experience. So it for a lot, like I just in general, like and since having these things where it's like, okay, you have a month to get to a place where you're comfortable auditioning when you haven't sung for 2 years, right? Like these kinds of situations where you're like, well, you're just going to have to do it. And listening to my audition tapes, I'm not happy with them for my standards, but I'm happy with them from like the perspective of you had a month, right?
So like after your like Little Mermaid experience where you like lost your voice, you didn't sing for like the rest of the year, like at all, really?
Sang for the rest of the year. And then after that, I came home and I hadn't sung.
Okay.
I'd started to prepare to actually do like a solo with my grandmother's choir, but I was doing that for like a month and then the concert got canceled because of COVID.
Oh,
And I was kind of thrown into it anyway with only 2 months to prepare. So, I hadn't really been doing it. Yeah. So I think a lot of deciding to go back is just learning how to do it differently. I would say too, like the UVic program doesn't have an opera program. It doesn't have a musical theater program. Like you don't have to choose these streams like I did at University of Manitoba, and you do at all the major ones. So I think I'm hoping for a bit more of like a low key thing where also people aren't trying to trample everybody constantly, because that was another big thing and something that was like, to be honest, even though I didn't talk about it, it was a really big contributing factor in my decision about going back.
the competitiveness of University of Manitoba?
I wouldn't even say it's like a competitiveness, and it's not just University of Manitoba. It's also like something that I developed in high school. It's like this thing in music, and I mean, this is a gross generalization, but I think specifically in voice, and maybe even more specifically as a soprano, where we're a dime a dozen, a lot of, but you learn to kind of.
And as a prima donna, apparently. So,
No, there's so many sopranos, it's insane. But you kind of learn to squash everybody else to put yourself higher, and that's not a good way to do it. And even like some of the friends that I had in high school, we kind of learned how to do that together, and maybe you observed this, like we did it pretty harshly, and that's not very good.
The culture among the basses and tenors is like the antithesis of that. Everyone's just like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you got your parts?" Yeah, I think so.
And I mean,
All
to
right,
be
let's make
honest,
a
when
video
like,
of some random thing now.
yeah, you guys were.
Wasn't good.
Hmm.
I think I was actually more on tap. I was a different.
Yes.
Back then, I was more. If it was me now, I would just whatever. But
Yeah,
back
you
then,
weren't quite
I was more structured.
structured. Yeah. Yeah, but we were maybe too structured.
Yeah.
Some other people who shall not be named. But yeah, so I think I learned how to just, you know, take away people's joy. No, but like it
Really
is
good
a thing that
lesson, and we're just gonna
happens.
end the podcast on that note. Just kidding.
No, 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 no. I'm just kidding. But yeah, and it happened at University of Manitoba too. And I don't think that I was necessarily contributing to it as much. But it was happening around me, and it was happening oddly from like high school cliques that had carried into the program. And it just like this idea that, you know, you have to be on top of everybody else all the time, which isn't true. Even if you're maybe technically better or whatever, you don't have to squash people. You literally don't. You can be friends with them too, right? Um, and I didn't know how to do all of that. And I think when you're contributing to that atmosphere, you also kind of feel kind of crap about yourself. Like, how are you supposed to feel good about yourself if you're putting people down all the time? To be honest, like it is what it is. And I think that I'm searching for a place that's not going to support that. And
Do you feel like the culture at UVic is more like less dog eat dog, as they say?
I'm hoping. I'm hoping because there isn't the same kind of competitive program choices that you have to make.
Hmm.
But even if it is, I think I'm better equipped to not fall into that trap again.
Yeah, it's the lessons you learn for yourself. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, the group matters, but the individual, it's more important in that case, right?
totally.
Because you're the you
Yeah.
get to choose what you allow to permeate into your
Hmm.
experience and what you don't, right? Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, no, of course, within reason, but I think it's an important lesson, and I think that I mean, whenever I've talked to a senior musician or whatever, they all and we've brought that up, like they've all experienced it too. It's just
Mhm.
I think learning how to not participate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it kind of goes back to the education thing that we were talking about earlier about how you just have to learn how to not try to like in some things like science, you could argue, oh, you need to be competitive so that we get the best people, and maybe that's true. Maybe they should do an experiment to see if it's true. But I think oftentimes just that's just wrong because a lot of times the best people, it's because sometimes yes they had hardships and that drove somebody in order to be really successful, but I don't think that people's lives are happy if the reason they're successful is because they were put through all this bad stuff and then they did it
Totally.
as a result. Like, yeah, sure, maybe that happens. Maybe that's how, but maybe that kind of success is like the mafia success, right? Like it's, like they're like, the world destroyed me, so I'll destroy the world.
Oh
Um,
boy.
but I think that, like you were saying, just having a balanced view and just being more kind and trying to be successful, but not like at the expense of other people is super important, both in education and in any sort of academic
Yeah.
creative career.
And I think as an educator, you can choose how much you want to foster that in your students. Yeah.
Hmm. The competitiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously like I think with music and with anything where you're constantly auditioning for things or constant, and right, always trying to get the best of the best, that there's always going to be elements of that, like fostering those kinds of behaviors in your students. But I don't know, I think that at the same time, it doesn't always help people, and especially in a place where you need to be vulnerable all the time, it can make that really difficult. Yeah. And it's hard, I think, to differentiate where you need to foster the competitiveness and where you need to tone it down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Can't give a free ride, but you also don't want to hurt people at the expense of yourself.
Yeah. Totally. No
Awesome.
free rides.
No free rides.
No free rides.
Well, this has been so much fun so far.
Yeah.
I just have one more question that I
Okay.
have been asking everyone since, not in the first episode. I forgot. I missed Murat,
Oh, shoot.
but I'll ask him next time he comes around. It's just kind of, the theme is stories, and so I figure that a good question is based off your experiences so far in life. If you could tell one story or one message that gets through all the noise and really connects with people, because there's so much misinformation and noise and stuff coming around, but if you could get one story or one message or one kind of idea through and that you would really connect with people, what would that story, message, or idea be?
Probably that it's okay to know your limit and to walk away. You don't have to push through everything all the time. I mean, I learned that, and maybe that comes with a bit of regret sometimes, but ultimately, I think that prioritizing yourself and your needs is also important. And just because I have friends that often say, like, you can push through it or whatever, right? Because it's your choice or whatever. I think that it's equally as important to know when you need to walk away.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. That's awesome. No, seriously, I think that's a good reminder. It's very easy to get caught up in, I have to complete this for posterity, or because everyone is going to think bad of me if I don't. But,
yeah.
and some things maybe we do need to follow through on, but
totally. But when it's not good for you, I think sometimes it's okay to walk away. You'll find something that is good for you, right? And then you can complete that. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. If not, maybe you need some help. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
No.
Well, it's been awesome having you. So much fun.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say before we end this?
No. No, it's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like you mentioned before, like, what is a podcast? But I don't know, it's just fun conversations. Like, I don't think we would have had that conversation without this kind of medium. So it's kind of
probably not. No, it's been great.
Kind of cool. I learned a lot, so I'm more insight into Julianna now.
Good. Happy to teach. Yeah.
Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and listened to this episode featuring Julianna Reid. Episode 6 will be coming out soon, so if you got any value out of this or if you enjoyed this, you can find that episode wherever you get your podcasts. All right, guys. Have a good one.